Now, good morning. My name is Stephen Nolan, Managing Director of the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability, live from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. I'm delighted to have Irish Cabinet Member, Minister Eamon for the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications join me here today. Minister, it's an absolute thrill and a delight to have you here with us. I know you're back-to-back with meetings today and going into negotiations, so let's get stuck into a few questions, if I may, and get your sense of what's happening here at COP. So I know you were in COP26 last year in Glasgow. I remember seeing you on national news. And then obviously 12 months on, you are here, our Irish Taoiseach has been here, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been here, the Minister of Development has been here. So at a cabinet level, a lot of Irish members of cabinet have been here. What were your ambitions coming into COP27 and being here the last few days? Are they being met, please?
Well, it's good. Hello, Stephen. It's great to be here. The ambition, I think, is to make sure we continue to accelerate the delivery of the Paris Climate Agreement, the progress that was made in Glasgow last year, in all the areas, how we switch to new alternative renewable power supplies, how we protect the most vulnerable. I think actually in Egypt here, it is an African COP. I think the centre of what we need to deliver is around people seeing that climate justice is at the centre of this transition. I'm, please God and touch wood, I hope we will deliver a good outcome in that. It's uncertain. We're here at Wednesday morning and there's a lot of work to be done. I'll be fortunate I'll be involved in the EU negotiating team on that issue. So we have a real challenge. I think the principles that will deliver a good outcome is that we protect the most vulnerable most, that we have what the Maldives government said, a mosaic of solutions. And I think included in that is reform of the global financial institutions, the MDBs, the financial markets, that yes, we need, absolutely as governments, we have to stand up and give a commitment to provide support for loss and damage, but it can't be that on its own. If we're to do what Nicholas Stern says we need to do, to go from billions solution to trillions solution, then we have to have that whole variety of funding sources. And so that issue about climate finance and loss and damage, I think, is the centre of what we need to deliver. And behind it, a clear understanding that climate justice is at the centre of the Paris Climate Agreement is what we need to have.
Great, thank you for that, Minister. And that's at the heart of what Financial Centres for Sustainability is trying to do. If I can, maybe, we're here in Sharm el-Sheikh, but let's go all the way back to Ireland. I know yourself and your colleagues and Brian and the team are working on the revised and updated Climate Action Plan. What are your, if I may, your ambitions over the next 12 months at a domestic level, building on the leadership that you've already brought to climate action within Ireland, please?
We have very strong climate law, backed up by European law, backed up as well by the companies that we would work with, the companies that invest in Ireland. There are some 500 companies who've committed towards 100% zero carbon future. So we have very strong targets, very strong laws. It's critical that we deliver now. And in the delivery, firstly, it'll be the likes of delivering the first of our offshore auctions to deliver 5 gigawatts of offshore power. We're very strong onshore, we now need to go offshore. In transport, we need to start the process where we reduce the volume of transport, where we shift towards walking, cycling, public transport, and where we also improve the technologies, electrified transport and so on. And thirdly, I suppose, if there are the 4 key areas, agriculture, that we reduce our use of fertiliser, which is an expense, which is polluting our waters and our land, and which is high carbon. We need to switch to new forms of income for farming in anaerobic digestion, in agroforestry connected to farming, not cutting off the farm, but integrating the storage of carbon within it. And then lastly, we have a very strong new circular economy law. So it is about reducing waste, promoting efficiency, having design manufacturing systems where we reduce the inputs, but still maintain the services to our people. So it's no longer just about policies, it's no longer about plans, it is about delivering real reductions in emissions through those sort of mechanisms.
And Minister, I'm just conscious of time, so I've got 1.5 questions left, if I may. My next question, just building on what you said there, last week here in COP there was a huge debate and a big focus on the net zero transition for corporates. And what was very clear as we moved from intent to implementation, building on Glasgow last year, this year, and obviously towards UAE next year, zero tolerance for greenwashing. And, you know, when you mention some of these corporates that we're working with, and everybody doing a fantastic job, but from your perspective of Minister of Climate, what can we do within Ireland to ensure that we don't see greenwashing within Irish industry, and that actually Ireland in many ways over the last decades has been exemplars in the sectors that we focused on to be leaders in. So how can we actually become a leader in the whole transition at a corporate level, please?
I think probably first and foremost, it's in rigorous standards in the accountancy world, where you're actually really a very clear, transparent and accurate assessment of companies' scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, what they do in their operations, what the consumption of their products does for the climate and environment, and what their suppliers are doing. And I think a lot of companies are now signing up to these science-based targets, that the widespread application and delivery of those, and you're right, to make sure in such accounting standards that we do not lose the public trust, that if we are on the one hand saying, oh, we're the best and we're delivering on ambitions, but people find out that that actually is not a real reduction, or that it has knock-on consequences elsewhere which has an environmental impact. If that happens, that would undermine public trust. And the biggest missing, most important agreement to make the scale of the change we need to make, in my mind, is such public and therefore political commitment towards it. So first and foremost, independent, clear assessment of what the companies are doing, where their finances are coming from and where they're going to back up any claims around green credentials. It would be a worse outcome if a company was to, as you say, to greenwash, to pretend or not to be fully transparent and accurate in that. That in the end would do more damage than not acting in the first place.
And Minister, just finally, you're good enough to be here with us today in the UNDP Pavilion. You're also good enough to support UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability and our programme, and that's specifically focused, and the funding support for that is focused on an SDG pipeline builder. Why, in terms of the SDGs, so important to you to see that type of investment go into a programme in the emerging and developing world to stimulate SDG and SDG investment? Why is that so important to you, please, Minister?
Go back to that issue about public support. This is a global problem. We need to involve everyone. Every place matters, every person matters. The start of this COP, the Prime Minister of Bermuda said that there's a real injustice in the current system where the developing world is typically paying 14% for the capital transition we need to make, where the developer world is paying less than 4%. We need to reduce that gap. We do it in two ways. Firstly, in the negotiations, as part of this mosaic of financing solutions for climate finance, we need to take up the sort of Bridgetown proposals around reform of the multilateral development banks, reform of the IMF and the World Bank, reform of the financial markets themselves, opening up new opportunities in the likes of SDRs or other mechanisms so that there's finance available for the developing world. But secondly then, I've just come from another pavilion where I was speaking with the Commissioner, the African Commissioner on this. We in the investments we need to make, decarbonise absolutely, but we need to protect nature and bring communities with us. We need to make sure that we maintain local support, that we don't just come in with big mega renewable projects or other investment projects and don't actually bring it back to local community gain and local community support. Because in the end, that would undermine political and public support for the transition, and that is the biggest capital risk. If you look at why are the interest rates high, certain issues on the international financial system, but also is when the finance community cannot really understand or price in the environmental risks, the political planning, public policy risks, that's where they tend to put premiums on high financing. The more we can de-risk that, the lower the cost of the capital transition, and this is a big capital transition, not just in energy, in water, in transport, in housing, so many different aspects, but they're all connected. And I think de-risking it to lower the interest rate cost is one of the most important things we need to do.
Well, look, Minister, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you very much. You've made a funding commitment of €2.5 million to UNDP FC4S to help us develop our first SDG pipeline builder, and hopefully in the next coming months, briefing you and your team and Brian and colleagues, you will see progress toward making that project an impact on the ground. And then when we get back to COP28 next year, we'll have something very meaningful to show you across those communities within Africa and maybe further afield. So, Minister Eamon Ryan, thank you very much for being with us today at COP27.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah. Thanks.